Okay. Thank you so much for being here. I'm also going to be better about the mic tonight because I think I wasn't too good last night. But hopefully I'm not doing a lot of talking today. I want to say thank you again. People returned. That's very exciting to me. And to all of the online participation, just engaging with people, checking in with folks. It was a very powerful conversation. And some of the things shared after the live stream shut down actually had me reformat or just add to my Warman. It's going to be like a never-ending Warman. We're never going to get to the material. So my thought for today is to get to some of the things we missed yesterday, which is about, I was very inspired by last week's conversation around ecology and how Bedour emphasized and centered the landscape of Mississippi. The swampland, the wooded area. You guys kind of went over how the land impacts the politics. And this is really important. I was saying earlier to somebody, like, Cabral was like, there are no mountains here, so I can't use the traditional revolutionary struggle of hiding out in the mountains. My geography doesn't allow for Foucault theory, essentially. So you must respond to the land. Politics must be a response to the land, to the geography. And so just after personal stories about water and this ecological theme, I want to continue thinking about violence through ecology for a little bit. And this goes back to this idea of how to see a lynching. Or what we were just talking about is why, yes. Why Black people make things so saucy about horrible things. Like, this is a tension, the beauty of the terror, or making something beautiful out of the terror in our arts. And so I think that's a pedagogical tool so that we don't all get PTSD from every, episode, everything we see, that we have these authors, a Toni Morrison or Yvonne Vera, who I'm going to read from today, who help you see a lynching. And then I'm going to read a little bit from my own work, I think, just like a tiny thing about trees. And so this is the, you're so affirming. So I'm going to read, my dissertation was called Of Master and State, and it kind of gets into those themes of yesterday around the private right to violence, or these forms like the KKK, the Citizens Council, which isn't private, but these kind of different bases of white power. And that chapter specifically is about the atom bomb and how all the uranium for the first atom bomb came from Congo. So I begin thinking from the trees, because I want to think about how earth power is stolen to generate war power, but earth is ours. And so I think about it as earth versus world. And so we need to preserve earth power and stop that conversion of earth power into war power and into their world. So I'll read a little bit to think about trees, and then I'll read from Butterfly Burning, my favorite novel. And it's about Zimbabwe. And it begins with the anti-colonial struggle against the British. And this scene that she's going to talk about is a mass hanging in the 1890s. And then I'll read a poem. I'm actually going to start with a poem by Audre Lorde called After Images. And it's about Mississippi and the waters of the Mississippi, and how the water completes the story on both sides. And then if you have time, I encourage you to read The Bones of My Father by, I think I spelled his name wrong, Etheridge Knight. Yes, a poet. He's another, yes, exactly. And The Bones of My Father are also about the Mississippi waters. And he is phenomenal. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let me start with After Images. It's kind of it's a dense poem. I'm gonna go slow, but think about the waters and this idea of politics coming full circle. So after we do this, we'll watch clips from Mississippi Burning and PBS thing on Freedom Summer. And then we'll see where we are from there. I just want to hear how you respond to those, the visual stuff. So the visual stuff might be around 30 minutes. So let's see where this takes us and then what we watch and how much time we have left. Okay, so After Images. Maybe I can. So an after image is an optical illusion, which I didn't get to the optical illusion I wanted to start with Fanon yesterday. Let me do it. So he has this play called Parallel Hands, and not very many people have read it. I think it came out in the Alienation and Freedom collection. And essentially it's responding to this optical illusion that, I don't know, came out in 1860. And those are parallel lines underneath, but the dashes create an illusion between foreground and background. And I think that is often what happens to Black people, of how we're backgrounded and white people are foregrounded. I'm often trying to come up with different ways to arrange the power dynamic. Joy James calls it, like, I think the epicenter and the hypocenter. So there's like a subterranean point of antagonism, and then there's like a surface level of antagonism. So I always like that. Or she uses leveraging as like a political idea. I would like to think about foregrounding and backgrounding. Fanon named the play Parallel Hands to refer to this idea that I can see beyond the illusion. I see the parallel lines and I act with parallel hands. And then I was brought to the MFDP strategy of a parallel process, which we might call dual power. So what Bador went over with the freedom vote and all the mock election, Aaron Henry and all of that, and the word they always use is a parallel process. And so how can a parallel process allows the people to see both tracks running at the same time. It's very important, like mocking things, because it gives them that, it's a visual stand one against the other. And so if you go through the SNCC stuff, it's always, we did a parallel process. And I was like really inspired by that word and that model of like a dual power kind of thing. And then, I saw Fanon's play and I thought, okay, the optical illusion. So an after image is also an optical illusion. It's when the vision remains after it was there. So like if you close your eyes and you can still see something, whatever. So after image. However the image enters, its force remains. Thank you for coming. Within. Okay, let me start over. However the image enters, its force remains within my eyes. Rock-strewn caves where dragonfish evolve, wild for life, relentless and acquisitive, learning to survive where there is no food. My eyes are always hungry and remembering, however the image enters, its force remains. A white woman stands bereft and empty. A Black boy hacked into a murderous lesson, recalled in me forever, like a lurch of earth on the edge of sleep, etched into my visions, food for dragonfish that learn to live upon whatever they must eat, fused images beneath my pain. The Pearl River floods through the streets of Jackson, a Mississippi summer televised. Trapped houses, I love this image, trapped houses kneel like sinners in the rain. A white woman climbs from her roof to a passing boat. Her fingers tarry for a moment on the chimney, now awash. Tearless and no longer young, she holds a tattered baby's blanket in her arms. In a flickering after image of the nightmare rain, a microphone thrust up against her flat, bewildered words. We just come from the bank yesterday, borrowing money to pay the income tax. Now everything's gone. I never knew it could be so hard. Despair weighs down her voice like Pearl River mud, caked around the edges, her pale eyes scanning the camera for help or explanation. Unanswered, she shifts her search across the watered street, dry-eyed. Hard, but not this hard. Two children hurl themselves against her, hanging upon her coat like mirrors, until a man with ham-like hands, pull her aside, snarling, "She ain't got nothing more to say." And that lie hangs in his mouth like a shred of rotting meat. I inherited Jackson, Mississippi. For my majority, it gave me Emmett Till, his 15 years puffed out like bruises on plump boy cheeks, his only Mississippi summer, whistling a 21-gun salute to Dixie as a white girl passed him in the street, and he was baptized my son forever in the midnight waters of the Pearl. His broken body is the after image of my 21st year, when I walked through a northern summer, my eyes averted from each corner's photographies. Newspapers, protest posters, magazines, police story, confidential, true, the avid insistence of detail. The avid insistence of detail, pretending insight or information. I love that. The length of gash across the dead boy's loins, his grieving mother's lamentation, the severed lips, how many burns, his gouged out eyes, sewed shut upon the screaming covers, louder than life, all over the veiled warning, the secret relish of a black child's mutilated body, fingered by street corner eyes, bruise upon livid bruise, and wherever I looked that summer, I learned to be at home with children's blood. This summer too. How many children have died this summer? I learned to be at home with children's blood, with savored violence, with pictures of black broken flesh, used, crumpled, and discarded, lying amid the sidewalk like a raped woman's face. A black boy from Chicago whistled on the streets of Jackson, Mississippi, protesting what he thought was a manly thing to do. His teachers ripped his eyes out, his sex, his tongue, and flung him to the Pearl, weighted with stone. In the name of white womanhood, they took their aroused honor back to Jackson and celebrated in a whorehouse the double ritual of white manhood confirmed. Emmett Till rides the crest of the Pearl, whistling 24 years. His ghost lay like the shade of a raped woman, and a white girl has grown older in costly honor. What did she pay to never know its price? What did she pay to never know its price? Now the Pearl River speaks its muddy judgment. Now the Pearl River speaks. The waters are returning. The waters are flooding Jackson. I never knew it could be this hard, the white woman says. Do you see? The waters that drowned him are drowning the homes that are kneeling in prayer, right? The Pearl River speaks its muddy judgment, and I can withhold my pity and my bread. Hard, but not this hard. Her face is flat with resignation and despair, with ancient and familiar sorrows, a woman surveying her crumpled future as the white girl besmirched by Emmett's whistle never allowed her own tongue without power or conclusion, unvoiced. She stands adrift in the ruins of her honor, and a man with an executioner's face pulls her away. Lord is following the circuits of patriarchal violence, right? Even though she's not empathetic to the woman, she sees her within the same framework of domination. Within my eyes, the flickering after images of a nightmare reign, a woman wrings her hands beneath the weight of agonies remembered. I wade through summer ghosts, betrayed by vision, hers and my own, becoming dragonfish to survive, the horrors we are living, with tortured lungs adapting to breath blood. A woman measures her life's damage. My eyes are caves, chunks of etched rock, tied to the ghost of a black boy, whistling, crying and afraid. Her children cluster like little mirrors of despair, their father's hands upon them, and soundlessly a woman begins to weep. And that's called After Images. So I want to, by Audre Lorde. So I want to sit with this idea of the illusion, the waters returning, vengeance, ecological vengeance, but also we're tied together, like we're stuck. She's identifying with the woman in a way that's not empathy, but it's a recognition of a kind of impossible relation that you are in. But the fact that it's called After Images and what you said about Emmett Till yesterday is staying with me. Okay, so that's one. Again, on this theme of how to represent violence, how to represent the violence that's committed against Black people and the political violence Black people pursue. Those are like two dynamics. What strategies do we have that don't rely on sort of the brutality of the image to speak? We're tired of seeing those images. So what strategies, artistic and otherwise, do we have to talk and break down the violence? Audre Lorde gives us one. Here's another. This again about the lynching. No, this is Yvonne Vera now. This is called Butterfly Burning, and she's from Zimbabwe. And this novel is about kind of women's struggle in a post-independence period. But this is a memory. It's a flashback to the anti-colonial struggle of the 1890s. The voices of drowned men cannot be heard. The drowned die in whispers. They die in infinite solitude. The air leaves their bodies in a liquid breeze. First, they sink as far as the weight of their bodies will allow. Then they float. They touch the surface with their faces, not their arms, with their lips. Nothing will bring them back. The skin is lighter than air. They can see even though all their senses have been silenced. They are not blind. Their gift is to see through every particle of water. They breathe in water. They seek flight, lighter than raindrops. A body floats to shore. Everything grows heavy, is buried, decays, or dries, then burns into a silver ash of wood. The men are left up in the tree all day and night. The moon gives them a living light that rises like a soft layer of smoke from their bodies. Remember, this is a mass hanging, a spiraling mist in which their skin melts off. The tree itself is veiled. Then its strong branches emerge, denying secrecy, and reveal the broken figures weighing down upon their arms. The branches bend down, high up off the ground, some lower. 17 male bodies blown into the branches by a ruthless wind. Night. Mist ascends like luxurious tears and claims the men. They are swimmers, in the mist, pulling up and then down the tree like floating wood. Swimmers with no arms, floating and forever dipping down, sinking in a tree which has become a lake of light. Eyes not closed, not there, cavities where a child might store a pebble. Palms touch and tucked flat between their thighs. That's the way a lynched body hangs. The dead men remain in the tree for days, their legs tied together, their hands hanging close to their stomachs. Toes are turned down to the ground as though the body would leap to safety. The foot curls like a fist, facing down, the feet of dancers who have left the ground. Right? These were rebels. The feet of dancers who have left the ground, caught, surprised by something in the air which they thought free. The limbs smooth and taut of dancers in a song with no words spoken, a dance denied, a blossom in a wind, a dark elegy. Morning beams a sharp daylight that cuts a sudden profile of their human form. Ugh, I love that. Morning beams a sharp daylight that cuts a sudden profile of their human form. The sun breaks behind each shoulder. Can you see this? The sun breaks behind each shoulder. The rope is no longer visible. The men are standing in the air with their heads looking downward. The dead men are living, no longer floating, standing motionless and upright with flickering flame on their bowed faces, foreheads, and forever broken necks. Naked shoulders, quiet and mute, the entire body too stiff for awakening, the earth too still, the dead as dead, the living equally dying and bewildered. In the morning, they absorb the joyful light, which is full of pods breaking, releasing a multitude of white fluffy seeds, which float toward the dead and glow like night insects. They float across their still shoulders and fall into the river. The pod explodes quietly, like a mind dying. They are not men, but shadows. They are silhouettes. The men remain there till the ropes holding them up are weakened by decaying flesh and succumb like all things softened and decayed. Or is it that the neck has softened before the rope and the dead bodies swoop down and lie unheeded? The birds fall down with the bodies. I'll stop there. And the last thing will be my little writing. I gotta throw myself in here. My dissertation was called Of Master and State. And so this is a little excerpt. My name is Felicia. No last names. No, okay. Denaud. Felicia Denaud. Eventually there'll be a book, hopefully. But again, on this theme, so Yvonne gives us this image of lynched men, but they're floating, they're ethereal, the light's breaking over their neck. It's this, she has this essay where she writes about going, or there's something where she writes about going and seeing the actual photo and how perfectly her literary rendition was. She was surprised because she had done it. She had written it before she had seen the photo of the hanged men. But there's something elegant and, I don't know, revolutionary about the description to me, about how to see a dead body, especially a dead body that was in rebellion before it died. And so here's my piece. Again, going back to water, trees, ecology, and the different ways we can understand what happens to us, but that we are also not the only victims, that trees are victims and water is a victim, and our ecologies are victimized in these processes. What were you doing during the war, during Earth's rebellion against world property and its human overseers? Where were you as Earth's skin, lacerated by the, quote, deadly life of logistics, by border rule and omnipotent technocrats, by continuous flow and the citizenship of stuff, by subsoil bondage and vertical infinity? Where were you as Earth's skin violently welded the human wound? What did you feel as Earth advanced an era of counter-logistics against this stage of imperialism? Did you answer the call to conspire, to interrupt the conversion of Earth power into war power? Oh, sorry, my computer's freezing. 1 second. Oh, y'all, I just lost my page. I'm sorry, hold on. Well, you know what? Did you answer the call to conspire? We'll leave it there. Maybe I'll come back to it. My computer is freezing. Reflections, thoughts in the chat. This idea of, I'm just prompting you because the next couple of images and what I'm going to show from Mississippi Burning are difficult. And I've actually chosen to take out some things because the N-word is just too much. So, but Mississippi Burning is heavy, and the content is heavy. So I wanted to enter this way. How you enter matters. And so I hope that makes sense. And I'll try to get this up so you can hear the rest of what I have to say about the lynching. But reflections on ecology, violence, Mississippi, lynching, all of these kind of things that we're putting, art.
Okay. Chat, you're here. Please speak to us. And by the way, there's a lot of brothers in this room, so sisters in the chat, will you also speak? I'm the only sister besides the teacher. Although maybe I didn't hear all the gender pronouns. It's great that you say how to us. I felt that directing, because I'm in another class and sometimes it's a lot about the content and the reality, but what about why am I here in 2024? So I'll leave it there because I want to hear and see those videos today and time out talking. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lupe.
The first thing you read reminded me of the essay Toni Morrison wrote called The Site of Memory before Beloved came out, which talks about the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. And, when people build houses alongside of it, when your house floods, your house isn't flooding. What is remembering what it does? So I thought that was interesting. And, well, when she was saying, your house isn't flooding, what is remembering what it does?
Water remembering.
And I'm paraphrasing, but.
That's fine. All right, can we play the trailer to Mississippi Burning? So Mississippi Burning is a movie from the 80s. I have this personal attachment to the movie. It's we're going to talk about why it misrepresents Freedom Summer, but I have a personal attachment. I don't think because I've been watching it for so long, maybe. And I think I rely on film quite a bit because, again, the image. I write from images in my mind. And I think that's why I identify with Yvonne Vera, this image of Emmett Till. You were talking about how that's located somewhere in your brain. You can never get it out. I'm sure Yvonne Vera had some relationship to this idea of the hanged rebels as well. But the image, the centrality of the image, and how much of the domination of Black people is out of visuality. Right? It's a total sensory conquest, but the visual is so key. That's what Fanon says, that they were able to create a kind of capture on site. I mean, that's impressive, you know. So Mississippi Burning, we're gonna look at the trailer. We're gonna watch the intro, because I think the intro puts you into the historical scene. You feel the terror, you feel the heat, you feel the rural. I love that, because I think we struggle to think historically, to evacuate your time and to enter another. That is the fun of history. Like, we don't have that much fun going back, but you know, in class, and they're like, "What would you be? A rebel?" So when we do go back, it has to be creatively, I'd say. And we have to learn how to go back. So the trailer, the intro, but cut it before they start talking. And then there's a scene where I think it personifies the dueling personalities of the American federal government. I think the FBI agents are supposed to represent the two kind of postures of the federal response, or two personalities maybe. And I think that scene exemplifies it perfectly. It's like 3 minutes. So those three, and then an actual PBS thing on Freedom Summer. So we're all working from the same kind of like base, and then just open conversation, and we can see where we're at with time.
I am sick and tired of going to the funerals of Black men who have been murdered by white men.
They are powerless against us if every single Anglo-Saxon Christian one of us stands together.
The rest of America don't see it that way, Mr. Mayor.
The rest of America don't mean a damn thing. You in Mississippi now.
You had us scared to death, man.
Don't you call me man, boy.
Did it ever occur to them they're going to end up dead?
The moment those 3 kids disappeared, it was news.
The moment the 3 civil rights workers disappeared, it was news.
Somebody's called Western to stand up. Get out of here.
You'd kill Frank? Is that what you're saying? I wouldn't give it no more thought than wringing a cat's neck.
These people crawled out of a sewer, Mr. Ward.
We do not accept Jews because they reject Christ. We do not accept Papists because they bow to a Roman dictator. We do not accept Turks, Orientals, nor Negroes.
We're not killers. That's the difference between them and us.
That's the difference between them and you. Did you smile when the bulldozer ran over the black kid's body?
We're here to protect Anglo-Saxon democracy and the American way.
What's wrong with these people?
1964, when America was at war with itself.
That makes me laugh. The voices. America was at war with itself. Okay, so now the first, whatever timestamp I put on that. And Mississippi Burning is the FBI's like code name for the case. The case being the murder of the 3 civil rights workers that we talked about yesterday. And think about the film strategy, the opening, the music, lighting.
Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home.
What is it? What do they want?
I don't know. It's past. Past. Is it a cop?
I can't see.
What the fuck are these jokers playing at?
Oh, they ain't playing, you better believe it. What are we gonna do?
I don't know. Okay, hold on, you guys.
There's a truck too.
Shit, it is a cop.
Better stop.
Okay, sit tight, you guys. Don't say anything. Let me talk. All right, we'll be all right. Just relax.
Y'all think you can drive any speed you want around here?
Pull-Ups has refastenable sides for changing that's easy as it gets.
I'm a big kid now.
We're coming up on a major fundraising deadline, and there aren't many more between now and the election. So I am asking.
Head out of your ass and get home.
I, Vincent Thompson, am the cheddar cheese champion of the world. In international competition with 42 other entries, my cheddar won first prize based on flavor, texture, appearance, and color. I've been a licensed cheesemaker since I was 17 years old. Our family
Glenn, I didn't expect home so early.
pounds of cheddar cheese each
I'm
year.
fine.
Signed, Vincent Thompson.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You'll find a small or large, as small taste to you, Mr. Thompson cheddar cheese.
Sir?
Say again? I'll be right there. Mr. Bird?
Yes, sir.
Get 5 men and meet me outside. Where's Anderson?
He's at the motel, sir.
You two take the front door. If anyone tries to get past you, break them down. You two take the door on the corridor. Mr. Bird?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go get Anderson. Bring him here. Don't tell him why. Don't tell him anything. Just get him here.
Okay, sorry. And then I'm going to respond to some things in the chat after I explain this. So one of the FBI agents ended up having a relationship with the woman that you just saw. And so an intimate relationship that her husband found out about. And so that's the premise of this scene. So she was beaten, now she's hospitalized, and that's where this action takes up. Yes, because he found out that she had an intimate relationship with one of the FBI. Now this is his like cinematic flourish, but is trying to speak to some of the gender dynamics in the South.
Mr. Anderson.
Stop! Mr. Anderson!
What the hell? I'm telling you to stop, and I mean it. We're not killers. That's the difference between them and us.
That's the difference between them and you.
You're not any more like them than I am.
Wrong. What do you care what I do with some bitch hiding behind a sheriff's badge? Don't you have the whole world to change?
That's right, and I'm changing it.
Oh, you're just as arrogant as you are stupid.
You're changing it, too.
I damn well gonna make some changes right now.
Don't be so stupid. Don't go messing this up just because you're partial to fooling around with witnesses.
You... Oh, come on. Oh. It don't mean shit to have a gun unless you're ready to use it.
I'll kill you right now if you don't listen to what I have to tell you.
Fuck.
Let me go. Let me go. We'll go after all of them. Together.
You wouldn't know how.
You're gonna teach me how.
You don't have the guts.
Not only do I have the guts, I have the authority.
What is that supposed to mean?
New rules. We nail them any way we can, even your way.
Is this you talking or some guy pulling your strings, huh?
Both.
We do it my way.
Your way.
With my people.
Whatever it takes.
Give me a minute. You think he would have shot me?
Oh, yes, sir.
He's a ballsy little bastard, isn't he?
They want me to say, let us not forget the two white.
And could you bring it back to the PowerPoint? Awesome. So what are, just from some of the things that we've been talking about, in a movie that centers an extreme act of repression at the start of this incredible, unprecedented project in Mississippi, right? From the trailer, from what you know about the murders themselves and that historical context, and then these clips that I've decided to show, what are your thoughts about how what happens to us is represented and how historical memory is generated?
Hello. So I thought about it a little differently. So what stuck out to me explicitly was the white woman was the subject that was willing to be fought over by the state. So the reason why that came to me first is because I actually have family from Jackson, Mississippi, right? And, you know, I was dragged there against my will, against my consent when I was young, and just seeing how different it was. And it was almost like going back in time when I went there when I was 9. And I bring that up because a lot of the same dynamics were still, from what I can remember, was still prevalent. So that's what that's what stuck out to me personally.
So the centrality of white womanhood to the kind of economy of violence, and that even though this is like a cinematic flourish, it's emphasizing that both the state and the white power elements that would be a connective point for them. That's really interesting.
Yeah, for me, for me, as a filmmaker, I have a different perspective. Well, it doesn't feel different for me, but maybe from others I would think it's different because I have to go in the boardroom and I have to pitch. So they're breaking down the finest elements of the project. They're breaking it all the way down, every little thing. Oh, it's a little too much Jim Forman, so you have to take him out in Act 1 and Act 2, and then
Interesting.
They're breaking him all the way down. If he says this, and I have to fight for significant little. Sometimes it's visuals. You know, it could be Black Eyed Peas on the table. Like it doesn't just have to be dialogue. It could be visuals. Yeah. So when you're up against the beast of Hollywood, it's a whole different sort of dynamic. It's hard. It's been very hard to tell the story and to get funded to tell the story. Nobody wants to tell this story. It's very surprising. I'm very glad as a filmmaker and as an artist from where I stand that we can actually get to watch. You know, because I'm looking at I watched this a couple months ago, but I really like the scene. I like the way it's shot. I like the lens that's used with the cars, because if you notice that lens is it's a long lens, and what it does is it makes the scene look together. So when you see the car, but you see the hills, there's a particular lens that takes that shot. And it takes a lot to get these people to come to the table and say, okay, we'll do that. And to see Schwerner, Goodman, and Chaney, and I'm like, wow, now I'm really thinking like, wow, that's cool, because you have to know that in cinema, the executives are going over every single line, and it doesn't have to be dialogue. When the scene is shot at night, they can say, well, or it looks like it's at dawn. It's like almost like 4 a.m. I love that. I wanted that because the the dew point. Because in Mississippi, you see the fog that rolls through the forest. It comes in at about 4 or 5 in the morning. Those are great for your cinema. You know, so you saw it when they roll past the marsh. You see that you only get that at 4 or 5 in the morning. So again, if it's in the script, the executives are like, well, I'm not sure if we really need to shoot at that time because this, and that. So every little thing you have to go over. So for me, as a filmmaker, I'm happy to see, you know, and this is old. But if you notice, we haven't seen anything else after that. And I just want to point out my project is called Black Privilege, White Power. And it focuses on Freedom Summer, and it focuses on Fannie Lou Hamer, but it also interjects my aunt. I was adopted, so it's a white woman. And what's really key about this, and the reason we did it strategically, is think about how many movies we've seen of Fannie Lou Hamer. Even recently, where Ingenue, I was there watching Ingenue at the Ford Foundation. They're asking for money. That movie's not getting made. Common came out and he was making a movie. That movie's not getting made.
Was that about Joanne Little?
No, it's about Fannie Lou Hamer.
Oh, because I heard he was trying to do one on Joanne Little as well.
So Hollywood is like, you ain't making no movie about no big black woman from the South with a 6th grade education. I'm telling you that right now. Nobody's giving money for that. One executive told me, you don't, what did he say? He said, you don't have a household name. I was like, what? I was just like, man, you know, so it's these little things that I want to point out. So I don't, without.
No, it's really important because part of this, where we want to go with this project, one of the visions is how do we start thinking about public knowledge and new technology and new strategies for telling our stories. So this insight, there are bottlenecks. And so how do we use new technology and what's available to us to continue? And that's what I want to put to you guys. Now that you have this information, what is your strategy? You do cinema, so that's really. And I want to see your documentary now. Now we have another. These are resources we need to develop, just like SNCC developed the resources that we are using now, and that's part of the vision. Is what do we need to make? What new technology is available, and what is public knowledge? So it doesn't become Hollywood history. Right. It becomes a public knowledge.
Two things, not to be rude or disrespectful to piggyback on what you're saying, but the bottleneck is not even close.
No, you know better than me.
Not even close.
I don't deal with any of that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And it's the same thing I mentioned
it's
the other
day.
day.
It's more just a shut door, right?
And it's weird. Like, it's like, what, man, what are you talking about? And they could care less. They're just like, well, you know. So, and then I forgot the other point. But, you think about Eyes on the Prize.
Yes.
Right? And see how
Judy Richardson is.
Right. And see how strong and powerful and impactful, but it's like nobody's ever come even close. I mean, Selma did a really good job, and some of them folks were disappointed with Selma. Julian Bond was upset.
For good reason.
Well,
for you, from your cinematic perspective.
I don't want to disrespect Julian Bond, but when you go in that room, ain't nobody in that room looking like us, and they got the money. So you're not making the movie unless they say it's okay. So when they start saying Jim Forman can't speak in Act 2, what you gonna do?
Right. Guerrilla cinema, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, but guerrilla cinema
it doesn't get the audience that
nobody's gonna see it. Yeah, if you want marketing.
So this is the strategizing. This is the cultural piece, but it's like a distributional piece. It really, and that's why I wanted, the case's name is Mississippi Burning, but also I wanted to bring in the public representation of the history, because the next thing I'm going to show you after I make a couple of comments is a PBS special that goes into Freedom Summer and this exact period. And I want you to see how the actual people that lived it talked about it, how that documentary is put together up against a cinematic take, just for the feeling of Freedom Summer. But I love this insight because it is exactly where we are trying to think. We don't want to just make syllabi and have courses. That's the bedrock. But we need to use the new technology and cinema, music, podcasting. But how? Like, we have the forms, we have the mediums, we have more mediums, but how do you do the story? And you're giving us this insight of, well, they're going to regulate who can speak when and this and that. So this is so important.
That's what I was going to say. The part where you see who's making the movie and all those names, I immediately thought, because I'm a videographer and a writer, how many of those people are our people or conscious white people, not just somebody who has the money.
Right.
So one strategy that's coming to my mind is how I got my video into a documentary film center. And I'll get to that. It's called Maysles.org, and it's a documentary film center in Harlem, but they do lots of hybrid things also. So you could, Maysles, Maysles, .org. But all the people in the chat, I'd like to hear them say, I'm in blah, 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 and I commit to getting the music of whatever, because those songs that you've been playing in this course could be a music watch with just music. And wherever you are in the chat, just say, I'm committed to having it in my living room or in some local place, because that's how you get the people to at least start to want to hear and see. I doubt if we're going to get the Hollywood capitalists, because they are thieves. They're total thieves. However, you could get outside of the U.S. places, even Cuba, because Cuba has its own film center that's totally paid for by the government. Gloria Rolando, who did the film, it's on YouTube, it's called Asada. That thing has been seen around the world thousands of times. So you don't just rely on this country to get out this country's history, because people outside of this country want to know the history. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that it did awaken my own brainwashing. Earlier today, in this class today, I don't remember exactly what you said, Felicia. It was, oh, and how did you learn about this? And what was your stand on it? Something like that. And I remembered that when I was in elementary school, I was criminally taught that we were the settlers and the horrible Indians were doing all this terrible stuff, and we pioneers, and I'm using we particularly, we pioneers were the ones who had to protect ourselves and circle the wagons. And I went home and the teacher said, write that up, and I wrote it up, and now we've done theater pieces on this and everything. That's another thing, just get theater, music, all the arts, art, to be a part of this SNCC Legacy Project, so that it's in many different mediums, not just film. Film is very expensive. But the thing is, I went home and I said, we did. And when I came back to school, I was in this so-called integrated blah, blah, blah. And the other black girl who was in the class, she got to speak before me. And she said, I was not a pioneer. And I tell you, what I hope people do is just, wherever you are in the chat, please tell us where you are, because that was a New York horror experience. I can only imagine what's happening in Georgia today. I spoke with a teacher there recently. She says they have to teach the kids in the so-called social civics part of an elementary school class. Smile and get along. That's what we're all here for. And that is criminal, because I'm not about smiling and they're not about smiling, the teachers like that, but they're being told in curriculums. Last, I'll say, there's a project, and it's from the Association, African American Study of Our History, AAS. I'll say it again later. It was the African American Study of Negro History, but now Negro Life and History. Now it's Association for the Study of African American Life and History. What they're doing is having teachers around the banned books issue on the days that they have, like, okay, we're going to have cookies and chocolate milk, and we're going to have a book to read and a little teddy bear. You get to take the book home. They're only picking banned books. So they say, drop everything and read a banned book in Florida, in other places, so that things like the music, especially from this course, I think that's going to be a very good way to get the information that we're doing this in the future. Who knows whose film it'll be, or whose theater project, or whose music project, but you start now. So please, in the chat, tell us where you are, in whatever country you are, in whatever city, whether you could at least have the clips that you get from this course shown on some horrible holiday in your country, too. Thank you.
I think we have one more, and then here, I think, and then Robert. I think he was next. Okay, are you sure?
No, I get after
him.
Yeah, just to make it quick, I want to bounce off of what I don't know your name. But so whenever I get to my dissertation, I do want to write about black music in particular, but being inspired by somebody like Fred Moten, one time he said that jazz has to be violent. And I think a lot of the ways in which we talk about black music, so to make it quick, I think that there is a reservoir of like revolutionary spirit ready to be tapped within Black music.
Yeah.
But I think that especially when we talk about getting in the academy, there's a certain type of decorum. Like now it might be cool to study somebody like Miles Davis.
Right.
And I'm trying to accelerate that, where it's like, how can we look at, say for instance, like rappers like Makami and how he talks about Haitian pride and how he pulls directly from his ancestors. I mean, he's not no doctor, but it is a reservoir ready to be tapped. And so I think about, you know, dying colonialism, where Fanon talks about how the rebels took over radios. And how can we do that under a really sophisticated surveillance state? I think that there are ways to do it. I just might need y'all's help in figuring that out. So.
Well, this is so awesome that I'm here. I don't have any particular academic background, but I've been living for 72 years.
There you go.
and I'm happy to say I'm from West Africa, Liberia.
Wow.
And I'm connecting with you, diaspora in this way. First, can you clarify to me the concept of bottleneck?
Of what?
Of bottleneck.
Yeah, like it's like you get to a point in the project where it just shuts and you can't move beyond because of funding or them nitpicking and so we can never get our story told in our way.
Okay.
Well, not never, but in certain places.
So I've been doing some study, but metaphysics and all that stuff, and that's how I got the bus to go to DC, and I got up 5 o'clock. And I just got my bike, and I said, I'm coming down there. And somehow I had $47, and I gave it to him. And that was the greatest thing I did because of Netanyahu. And so I look at some clip of Adolf Hitler speaking, and I saw some aspect of that in Netanyahu speaking against the protests, and he's criticizing American kids about doing American things. This is our right to rally, and I look at this clip where it's like every time a human being doing something wrong, they're watching the back is that kind of energy, and I see all. And the thing about funding, we have to start thinking outside the box of anything, because the world it's globalized. Really, with all the technology, not to confine yourself, like what she brought up about Cuba. Even we can go out, we can communicate, we can talk, because everything is coming now. So that will be, we have to free our mind from the shackle. You know, I'm thinking about the elephant, you know, how from small you have a little line. We got to break this thing down. We have a good project. You just got to think a quantum field in that perspective. Because when you think in that perspective, it draws stuff. You know, once you have something, like I want to be a writer, and I'm going to be a writer, a bestseller, and because the stuff I've realized from the rubber plantation in Liberia to here, I got a lot of stuff to say.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's how we have to go. When you have a good project, you got to let it go.
Yes.
And don't limit yourself. Thank you.
I like that, because the SNCC vets always say, just do it. Yeah. Like, not Nike, but like, if you don't know how, learn and do it.
Because the thing about what the Bible says is neuroscience, when you focus on what you want to project, the prefrontal lobe will put it together. You don't have to worry how, the detail. You got to put it and believe it and claim it.
Yes. Wow. Thank you all. Did you want to take some things from the chat?
You got 2 questions, actually, and I think they're like follow-ups from yesterday, so I'll go through them. The first one is from Ed King.
Yes.
He says, Doctor, your comments about the MFDP were interesting and significant. I'm still alive but in poor health, wheelchair and senior home, and have major historical details on interpretations long of little interest to the media and historians.
Mm-hmm.
Please correct your false statement yesterday that Aaron Henry and Ed King were enemies of the MFDP delegates, etc. I worked hard against accepting 2-seat White House scheme, so no, some have claimed otherwise. They've never actually talked to me.
I'm so glad. So I saw that, and I'm so glad that, well, that Ed King is here. It's fantastic. And that I can correct what I think I maybe was misinterpreted or when I was communicating like with you all yesterday. So, and we'll get into it more tomorrow when we actually do the Atlantic City Challenge. But what I was hoping to emphasize was that the establishment was trying to draw out Ed King and Aaron Henry from their base. Not that Aaron Henry and Ed King were complicit in that, but that they were trying to generate the fracture by selecting when the MFDP had already decided on a democratic process, which I know Mr. King was the heartbeat of. So I think maybe I was not very clear yesterday because I was rushing through the information. And this is a very important point because it's one of the central kind of the 7 points I put up to consider, which was at the internal fracturing, right? I said I'm really interested in organizational schisms, how organizations come together, but how they collapse, and actually doing some sophisticated postmortems on why things collapse, why organizations dissolve, etc. So first of all, thank you for being here, Mr. King. I want to talk to you more about this, especially if you don't feel that you've been heard on this very important topic. And now I've been drawn to write about it more. So, but I very much want to emphasize the White House specifically. And that's what the literature really emphasizes. It's that, and Stokely Carmichael in the Black Power text, he has a chapter where he's kind of looking at the MFDP. And he says it's when the White House really starts ratcheting up the meddling. And so we're talking about, we talked about sort of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party for people who weren't here yesterday. And tomorrow we'll talk about when they go to the 1964 convention in Atlantic City and they're trying to be seated at delegates at the convention, right? So we have our convention coming up for the Dems in August in Chicago in a couple of weeks, right? So this is the same, this is rich time for real. And they wanted to break that Democratic base that the Mississippi Freedom Party was coming with, right? And so by trying to select who the delegates could be, not that Mr. Henry and Mr. King were pursuing that, but that there was a deliberate attempt by the LBJ administration to generate the fracture. And that fracture was they tried to generate along organizational and class lines. I think that's really important. But of course, the MFDP rejects the offer. That's the key. That's really key. They reject the compromise because they know it's a betrayal of the base. And so I will reiterate that tomorrow as well. When I'm talking about the fractures, it's really from the establishment trying to look at class and organizations and pit them against one another. So sincere apologies if it came off the other way, which is that it was generated internally, but rather there's organizational complexity. Let's go back to that slide maybe from what I wanted to kind of emphasize is the competing, what I said, agendas, personalities, interests, that are operating, and the MFDP having people from all across the spectrum, but the base being the poor folks of Mississippi, and being continually pushed to move away from that base in order to, let's see what they, I quoted Stokely's thing here, sorry. Oh, you told me to face this way. important. Okay, let's go to Ella for this. Let's stick on this. This is from Ella, well, actually, let me do the other one first. Ella Baker's convention speech. Okay, and there's a piece that we assigned, and it's a day in the life of Ella Baker from the collection, I think, The Black Woman. And these are 2 excerpts from that piece that was on the syllabus. And they're talking about how Ella wasn't supposed to be the convention speaker. Folks were like looking for Ralph Bunche, who was the first Black person to actually receive a Nobel Prize, famed diplomat, very involved in Israel-Palestine negotiations, or, you know, and many different conflicts, like internationally, and then also a staple of the Howard School of International Relations. And so he was a big man, essentially. And so there was some tension around who should the speaker be, where should they come from, and a reflection of the 2 currents which prevailed in the movement. And this is what I was referring to. The MFDP had to straddle this. Remember, Charles Payne calls it, there's the master narrative and the grassroots, right? And we were talking about how Medgar Evers is that bridge between those tracks. And very rarely do we have people that can do that work. That's what we were talking about yesterday. Okay, so in a reflection of the 2 currents which prevailed in the movement, there had been those who had wanted Ralph Bunche to make the convention address. He would draw the press, some argued, and show by such renowned anticipation that the MFDP was important. There were others who felt that the content of the convention address was more important than the fanfare which would attend a federal official or personage such as Bunche. This is Ella speaking now. I got the impression at this meeting that there were those who said the kids had controlled it too much. But the basis on which they seem to have been attempting to control it or to influence it seemed to me to have been a very sound basis, meaning the kids should be running the show. The youth should be running the show. Miss Baker reflected, it seems that at the point at which the MFDP's participation in the National Democratic Convention loomed as a reality, there was quite a rush on the part of some of the more middle-class types to be identified with the delegation. And so those dimensions was what I was trying to highlight. And again, LBJ's administration trying to tell the MFDP delegation who should do what, where, and how. And again, I'm going to emphasize this for the rest of the night, that Aaron Henry and Ed King weren't in any way in opposition to the MFDP, that the state is always looking for the division that they can exploit if they can. And if that's because there are multiple organizations working together, that becomes really hard on our part to coordinate and to prevent that kind of infiltration. But again, the MFDP stood against it. And that's the only reason why I believe we get Lowndes County freedom, the Lowndes County Party, because they had the integrity to say no. It gave the Alabama folk an opening to think dialectically about, well, then what's the next step? We graduate out of a party nestled under the Democratic Party and we do something autonomous. And that flow is because they rejected the compromise. That dialectic continues. That process of figuring it out continues because they rejected the establishment's bait, so to speak. So that's what I wanted to emphasize, is that the LBJ administration had people in mind that they, to do work on. And then to Ella's point that these are things that every organization has to deal with, which is how do you draw crowds, but how do you serve your base and continue that unity work? It's very difficult, and I again want to emphasize how many moving parts there were to this. Because in under 2 months, they had to figure out who was going to be in the delegation. the platform and all of that. So, but Miss Baker is always, if you really look at her reflection, she's always highlighting these things, but it's really a generational, I think for her, there was a real generational emphasis, even though she's mentioning class. She's mentioning how once the MFDP's threat was really understood, then new interests, outside interests were starting to meddle. So I apologize if that wasn't clear, because I should have made that clearer yesterday. And thank you so much, Mr. King. We'll talk more about the individual people tomorrow that were part of the delegation and how they actually were able to stand against. Because it's difficult when you're talking to the self-proclaimed, most powerful nation in the world, or whatever it is. So that, thank you so much for bringing my attention to that. I'm very happy we could address that, and it actually fed right into the convention and what the convention was trying to accomplish, which is really base building. And I've been emphasizing that so much because I think our generation, think like cadres. I actually tweeted this last night, where we all have the same kind of tight analytical, and it's the most revolutionary thing, and because you can get a whole 3 people on board with that, okay, right? So there's a difference, but you need cadres. You need tight, analytically, you need those units, those cells, whatever. But you also need bases. These are different activities that we sometimes confuse. I think especially when the politics are radical. We confuse base building and cadres a little bit. So I wanted to highlight how hard it is to build a base, because a base has so many internal social divisions, and that the state and masters, whatever you want to call them, are going to be searching for that and to exploit it. And that's where character, integrity, analysis, and the relations step up. And that's exactly what happened. But now I'm giving away tomorrow. So thank you so much. This is rich. This is really important. And I think you said there was one more in the chat, but then there's also more comments. So yeah, let me stop. Oh, one more thing. It came to Robert told me that folks were not able to see what we screened here. So what you should do, it's available for free on YouTube, Mississippi Burning. We watched the first 7 minutes, and then we went to 1 hour and 33 minutes and watched about 5 minutes, okay? Okay. Wonderful. And then if you cannot see the next thing we're going to show, which is more explicitly on around the murders and that feeling and how people were responding. It's the PBS American Experience. It's a 28-minute clip. If you Google that, Freedom Summer, PBS American Experience. If you cannot see it when we show it, just watch that. Man, you always on it. So I apologize for that technical error. All right, I think you were next.
No, it's all good. I just wanted to have just a quick input on something that I feel like, because I really appreciate what you're doing, and I'm just not putting together that is your work here. This is the Legacy Project. Is that what this work is that you're doing now?
So this is under, the SNCC Legacy Project, and it's Josh Bedore and I have been developing in conversation with SNCC veterans, what we just did. Okay, what's public knowledge? What knowledge do we have of SNCC? How do we get it out there? How do we communicate it? What new forms are available? What is a different way of teaching? Because we don't just want to do a historical account. We want to do something different, right? And so that's what this is all about. It's experimenting with different places to learn, different people to learn with, different styles. And that's why we thought each of us taking a week could model, because the syllabus is publicly available. So if you want to take this syllabus and go teach it, that's our goal. So I'm going to try to bring it to my university. They're bringing it to their university. We've actually had other professors join us, and they're going to commit to teaching it. And we're generating a set of 10 courses.
Where is the syllabus? Because I keep hearing about it. And I've been moving so fast that I may have gotten an email, but where can I find it?
Yes, it's on the SNCC Legacy website, and then there should be like a tab for readings and resources for this specifically, but then also the full syllabus. And then the others will be like come out to be public as well.
And
so
how about like contact information for the three of you? Is that there too?
It should be, but if it's not, I will definitely, if there's a whiteboard, I'll put my stuff up at the, like tomorrow, and then
Yeah, because I'd like to share some of the stuff I have.
Yeah, because then we can incorporate. So like the base of it is using SNCC materials, but then we add that really rich secondary stuff. So like your documentary would be wonderful, you know, and talking to Judy Richardson about like what would be great. See, these are the kind of connections that we want to make, and to continually generate our own autonomous account of what happened.
So so the last thing I just wanted to mention, I like, not in a way that I would want to tell anybody what to do, but just to sort of piggyback on a couple of the comments sort of about the world.
Yeah.
To add into the coalition of all these organizations is also the FBI. And they're also watching everybody individually because they have the money to do so. So I'm noticing that in these conversations, we're not really talking about that, because I like what you're just mentioning, because I remember the part where Ella Baker said, Fannie says that Adam Clayton comes up to her in the convention. You know what I mean? He's like, take the deal. She was like, with his slick hair and this dude from Harlem and all that. You know what I mean? But not to say that he was with the FBI, because I don't know that. But what I am saying is, I do know that the FBI has a lot of files on a lot of different people, and I've read some of the files, 300 pages in particular, of what they were doing. So they were like pulling strings all along the way. So it wasn't just that there was a bombing and people were getting killed, and then there was a protest, and then there was a rally at the thing. The FBI was involved in every little step, and a lot of times we don't even know who, what, when, and where. You know what I mean? So I'm just
the unaccounted, the invisible forces that are also a dimension that that's so, yes, as we try to uncover the truth of the account, that's important to remember that sometimes there are forces, and that speaks to Ed's point, Mr. King's point, that if he says like my account hasn't fully been taken down because the mainstream media was not interested in my account.
Not only
and then you have shadowy forces, and then you have, so there's so many things that produce the gaps or the misinterpretations.
And not only that, even right now, to this very moment, the FBI is still, because the comment came up about going to Cuba. But the FBI, I have a friend that went and did an interview with Asada, and they came to her house, and it was like, you better not never put that interview out. And she's like, I ain't putting the interview out. You know what I mean? So it's like that happens. I'm talking about, she teaches at NYU right now. This is real stuff.
This is real stuff.
That part we got to remember when we're talking about. So I have long interviews with a bunch of folks, and there's times in the interview where they'll stop. Like, I'm not answering that question.
That's a boundary I can't cross. I mean?
Yeah. Like, so it's like, it's real. So I just wanted to say that, because I don't really see that for the 2 weeks that I've come. I haven't really seen anything about how they were cunning too, man, because they were there.
Well, they were an actor. They were an active actor in the politics. Yeah.
They were, the whole time. Like when you read the report, because in the scene, sorry, and I'll be quiet.
No, this is your class.
I'm thinking about Edgar Ray killing, right? I'm thinking about it, but you think about him because, like, after the fact. So he's the one who gets convicted of the murder of the 3 people, but he was the Grand Wizard, right? Well, in the FBI file that I read about him, he was in Natchez in this case, and the SNCC workers are going to integrate this park in Natchez in '64 during Freedom Summer. They're like moving around. And when they get to the park, he pulls up next to their caravan. They got a row of cars integrated. They're going into the park. They stop at the stop sign. He pulls up on the other side of the street, like the wrong side. But he pulls up and they pop the hood. So the cars broke down. So the kids stay in their cars because they don't want to move over, get out of the way to be arrested for going on it. So they just sit in the cars. But I'm reading the FBI file, and they're like, Edgar Ray killing, you know what I'm saying? He's there at the park. This is after the bodies have disappeared, so he's still doing his thing. They haven't found the bodies yet. This is him. You know what I'm saying?
He's still like tailing the move. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And the FBI is watching them the whole time. You know what I mean?
Could you hit the PowerPoint so I can do the slides? I think. Okay. I wanted to. So to your point, I should probably add the FBI to that visual I have of the strings of the white power bases. That's important. And also it's a basis of white power. Yeah. Sorry.
It's a given.
That's right. It's a given.
We have to be conscientious of that.
That's absolutely.
It always will be there.
To bring it back to the movie,
okay.
which was that's what you didn't see in that scene is the infiltration aspect of it. They try to show how nice and kind it was and we're fighting for the good stuff type of narrative, but they don't show you the other
There's sinister involvement.
I mean, there was no good stuff.
Two-handed
That's just like I think the scene itself shows the hand involved because they changed the narrative.
Yes,
right? They didn't actually tell the truth there.
Right.
They lied to you, and that's the hand involved right there. But to bring it kind of back, right now in our political moment, one of the ways in which I speak about the things that are happening is this is an opportunity, since everyone's so dissatisfied, this is the opportunity to build new parties, another party. And it never ceased to amaze me how often this work had already been done by our ancestors.
Right.
And then that goes back to the conversation post-stream that we had real quick but it always gets co-opted, right? So here you have this amazing program, this amazing party, this amazing activity and organization. And then what? Right? And not to that we stand on their shoulders. I don't want to dishonor any of that at all. But like we're literally still talking about two trash parties that we can't choose. So where does that energy go? Right? Like,
we'll follow the loop. So you have MFDP, and then the Alabama folk are like, okay, we got to do it differently. So you get the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, and that accomplishes its set of goals, and it then inspires the Black Panthers. And then it comes back to the COINTELPRO
party, which is another
right, and then that gets exhausted, and so then what? Right,
and so like that bothers me.
Right,
I don't want to see that anymore. Right, we should be able to use hindsight to help us figure this out. Right, and I'm just not.
What question should we be asking about that process? Because that's an amazing, I mean, MFDP to me is so radical. It is really because of its base and because of its geographic epicenter. Let me stop. It's a great question.
I mean, it gets dislocated though, right?
Right.
It gets disembodied. We was talking about disembodiment the other day.
Yeah.
And now my child lives in that reality.
Right.
I'm not satisfied with that.
I'm not satisfied. I like that a lot.
So it's just like we got the elder on the line. You know what I mean? If you had to point to what is the thing that unravels that? All of this power here in lived experience and knowledge and wisdom, right? What unravels that? What co-ops that? What defenses? We have to strategize, like you said. We're not in a vacuum, right? We know we're being infiltrated and things are happening. There's going to be a force against us. So what is the thing that's unraveling that? Time and time again, where we can't make all the connections necessary to actually build the base, an actual base that turns into, well, not even turns into, we already had a party.
Right.
That's why it's so frustrating. But something that's lasting, where we actually have an option now.
Right.
We were saying I can vote A, B, or C because there's a C.
Because there's a C. So why does it unravel? And the question of form. Is the party sufficient? Maybe a question. Is the party a sufficient form, or is it a complicit form?
Also, the question is the historical conditions.
Right.
I don't know if anybody, I just like to see a show of hands, even in the chat. Has anybody heard
You
of...
love the chat.
No, but the Cooperation Jackson.
Yeah. And
No,
that's
but
where dual
who
power.
has heard of that inside this room here? Oh, okay. So I do request that our group, who's taken this class over the last whatever, all of us, wherever we are in the world, that we find out about cooperationjackson.org and look it up on YouTube, because the Panthers, I don't want to give all the ideas that the Black Feminist Conference last year in this very building spoke about, and the women from the Black Panther Party who spoke about some of the problems in there. The thing is, I think we always need inventory of whatever group we're in so that we can be prepared for the infiltration, because, of course, you're standing up to the state, those bastards will be in here. But one good thing about Cooperation Jackson, to give some uplift, is that the whole idea of worker co-ops, if anybody doesn't know what a worker co-op, maybe I just see the hand. Okay, everybody knows? Okay, where are the big worker co-ops? Okay. Oh, okay. So worker co-ops, in Spain, Mondragon in Spain. So I just want to point that out to people, because sometimes I also get down and feel horrible, but I think things shift because of the historical conditions, and we went much more international, so that here you have in Mississippi, Kali Akuno and his wife. I met these people and we did Reiki and blah, blah, blah. So they're down-to-earth, regular type people. Now some of them are in New Orleans, Louisiana, but the idea that you don't just face the capitalists alone in your own country, and this brother brought that up, because that way we can think wider. We have had some successes in the world, but if I only think of myself as an African located in this disastrous, beastly, murderous, vicious, going to take the climate, I get really scared and just defeated. But there have been the length of Cuba's ability to keep Assata Shakur, who was a Black Panther, protected for 60 years. The reality that in France they just had the left come together. There's still many contradictions, but I really encourage us to get a little bit outside of just we are enslaved people in one part of this planet.
Yeah, and I think SNCC, if this course was about 4 weeks, that would be the next, because if this course were 4 weeks long, that would be the next juncture, because they all become part of that internet. Like one of my very close mentors, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Many people move from SNCC to the continent. Yes. Angola, the Pan-African Congress that Bador was talking about. I think Cortland Cox is the last living member of the war tribunal that they set up to discuss whether the U.S. was committing genocide in Vietnam. Cortland Cox was like the central member of SNCC, right? And I'm researching that tribunal because I'm thinking about Vietnam right now in my work, and he's the last living member. SNCC was international, and that would be the next piece, because it's about this process of developing power and developing your analysis. But when when Mississippi is your base, it's very hard to go wrong. Let me see. What time is it? Oh my gosh. Okay. Keep talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
This point about infiltration and co-opted, like I was thinking, they started that film with Mahalia Jackson playing.
Yes, very good.
And I wanted to put that in context of like a long view.
Yeah.
Because I was just reading this book a couple of weeks ago called Black Sound: Making Race and Popular Music in America by Matthew Morrison.
Oh, he's lovely.
Yeah, and
brilliant.
In that book, he makes the point that the 49ers, like the real 49ers, like marched to the gold rush to a blackface song. A tune created by white performers that is obviously a perversion of black sounds. And so you know, the anthem to this indigenous genocide, anti-Asian violence and exploitation eventually, and anti-abolitionism was this blackface tune. And later on, he makes a point when music starts to be sold, when you tether the sound to the image, it allows one to disengage from blackness while creating and imagining their own version that's co-constructed by the anti-black structures of society. So, you know, it's, you know, when we're trying to even understand how we're even being co-opted and infiltrated, they're trying to disarm you from the fact that they're redeeming the state in this film by starting it with Mahalia Jackson. So it's not just going to be the blackface tune anymore. I'm going to actually take this governance,
make it state property.
Right. I'm going to take this grounded, authentic, even in some ways emancipatory sound, and I'm going to attach it to this federal project.
Right. Excellent study of that opening scene, because you always have to ask, why does it open this way, right?
I just want to make sure we're good on time because I don't want to step over.
You know, this is your class, and we'll get to the thing I was going to screen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, we still have 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So I thank everybody for their contributions because I'm actually pretty bad at history for a number of reasons. But when you talk about, because I have my notes here, you brought up like political cadres and cells versus bases. And, you know, I think a lot about what Joy James talks about in terms of like kind of concentric circles and pods, and how we need to have these pods that are able to connect to grassroots movement domestically, but also foreign. And so my wheelhouse, because I'm bad at history, I run to stuff like theory, and I'm making my way through this David Marriott essay when he talks about Fanon's notion of invention. And he basically is saying that we need to literally reinvent, like go on a kind of radical journey of reinventing what not only blackness means, but how to liberate ourselves from it, because not liberate ourselves from blackness, but liberate ourselves from struggle, excuse me. Because I forgot who brought it up, but I'm going to sound a little bit woo-woo-y here. I don't think I'm here by mistake.
That's not woo-woo-y.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm traumatized by the academy being around white people and that hyper-secularism, so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I don't think about time in the same way. So I'm just basically asking, what would the call be to reinvent, and what would be that process? And I think the first notion is the reason why our movements are co-opted. You know, there's a great book, FBI's, that talks about this.
I love it. Yeah, love that.
But I think the big thing...
So to clarify, that book is about how FBI agents are studied readers of our literature. They're our best readers. Yeah. And that title is a poem from Richard Wright.
So to wrap up the point,
yeah, no, please.
Even when we talk about co-optation, I think two things. One, you know, once again, as a person that's a fanatic over black music, black sound, even when it's co-opted, the reason why we keep on making dope shit is because they can't take something from us, and it's not anything material.
Right.
And also, in order to embark,
and that's in the politics too. There's what you just said. It's in the political heart and activity too.
And so, and the very last point is, I think when we realize that, we stop looking at ourselves as individuals, and then we can kind of be that, you know, instead of just one person sacrificing themselves for 2,000 years, it can be all of us. And then, yeah.
Can I make one point? Because I think it's really important, and then I want to hear. Oh God. Okay, it's a really important point. So, Herbert Lee, his assassination is key, because he's the first local person to join in 1961 when SNCC arrives to Mississippi. He's murdered in broad daylight and left out for hours, which reminds us of an execution of our time. His assassin was a state legislator. This is really important. I want to point to this last part here. His wife said this to Bob Moses. "You killed my husband. You killed my husband." I had no answer, he remembered. It is one thing to get beaten, quite another to be responsible, even indirectly, for a death. Oh, that left outside for hours shouldn't be there. For a death. It should be comma. That responsibility is when politics really become real. Herbert Lee is when consequence and repression get activated. But this not being an individual, Bob Moses, then he said, it became clear that we had to do something. He didn't back down. That's that de-individuating, like in remembering yourself. These are the moments I love as a political theorist, when you can go left or right. Those moments where it comes down to that like focal point. That's a crossroads where they all decided we're not going to back down from this. Okay, and they had been driven out. Amzie Moore talks about the consciousness raising over the 40s and the 50s. There are different organizations like the Regional Leadership Council, right? And then they had that big gathering in the Delta in the 40s where they had Thurgood Marshall coming through. But it gets repressed. And he says there's a point where all the militants leave in the 50s. They had to leave. 61 is when they say no effing more. Herbert Lee and his courage. But then here's the consequence. You killed my husband. You killed my husband. Now, this text, Surviving Southampton, everyone should read it. It's about the Nat Turner Rebellion, but from the perspective of the community and the women. Okay? And the same story happens. When he's being processed through or something, I was going to read it. I think you're done with hearing me read things. Somebody grabs him, yokes him up, and is like, you killed my son, you killed my son. And when I felt that historical, that shook me deeply. Same words. A slave rebellion, and then the Herbert Lee murder, and then Bob Moses being told that directly. And then what does he do with the responsibility and the not being an individual anymore? I mean, this is such a key moment, but it's really the historic. We're constantly like, how do you take responsibility for a death? They carried a lot of weight because then it is about responsibility. And remember, I began this with the human in the loop. Who do you hold accountable? Bob Moses and all the Macomb people. They held themselves accountable. Accountability was what? Intensifying the struggle. This is a huge moment, and you sparked I'm glad we got to come back to it before we close the class. Yes.
Basically, I want to emphasize, it's about ethics. In the fundamental stuff here, it's about ethics. You can really move with integrity, with integration, if you don't have ethics. That's the center core.
Right. An internal ethic, because what Stokely says is MFDP realized that morality wasn't going to work at the national level.
Exactly.
But inside,
right,
that internal ethic.
Yes. When you say something about the cadre,
yes,
and the base, you have to explain it. You have to understand it. You have to claim it. You have to be accountable. You have to know why one has to know why he cannot sell out. He has to understand that. He has to understand that there will be a bid. It has to be clear, because if I sell you out, I'm selling. The money doesn't. You have to clearly understand, define that, and integrate it. You got to go through a learning process to hold together and know that I cannot sell you out, because even though that $1 million is gone, and I'm selling out my whole diaspora,
and your descent, your future.
So, and even that money doesn't do me any good because I'm taking a guilt, and I'm looking around and I'm running. So that's why we have to educate ourselves. Like professor, you can't just do this, but the base, the people who in the project, we need a little bit of reaching out because you can't leave all the people and go in front. And that's what black people are always doing.
Exactly.
Where you going? There's no base. You got to build up the base.
Right. Fanon said political activity is not giving speeches. It's reminding the base, the masses, that they are the weapon.
Yes. And the thing is, the continuity. We have to have continuity to so that all the effort and all the learning and the wisdom is carried on.
Yes.
You can't cut in it.
And SNCC is really good at the continuity piece.
Yes,
SNCC flows.
And if you don't have continuity, then it's like you're starting over all the time. We have wisdom, but you have to hold this wisdom and to carry it where it is become exponential in power.
Yes.
But you got to keep that consistency. If you don't keep that, then you start over, and that's what the power to be takes advantage of it because they're reading more about they're planning stuff 10 steps about, because we're not reading about yourself. You're not opening yourself. Whether I wear my hat like this, you got to open yourself up to everybody.
Right.
Whether he wears his hat like this or not. That's about. I mean, people like the Israeli mafia connects with the intellectual and the banking, so.
Yeah, they're doing that work.
So we just cut off in units instead of like our academics from Harvard. We have to know them. They have to know the people from the project. They have to know the drug dealer. We all have to integrate and have economic power. Or the people from Africa or the Caribbean. We have to integrate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have 1 minute.
Make it quick. Made me think of something just now. And also, I think what I'm leaving with today is base building versus cadres.
Oh, go tweet. That was a late night tweet.
So it's interesting though, because it could be said that power is their power is produced by a cadre. Right? It's a very small group of people developing these grand schemes and throwing us into this illusion. And if morality isn't this a national, I think that kind of speaks to the illusion that we're in, because morality doesn't pierce it. And so, we value other things. And so to build a base, and to talk about people power, that's a lot more than a cadre. But it's so much easier to build something with 3 than 300.
Right.
That's just like the fact of the matter. I don't have no answers for that. I just was something that's another problem to solve.
Right. So we've generated several problems that we need to solve. No, but I think we're generating the answers. There's an emphasis on internationalism. There's an emphasis on continuity and organizations that embrace historical continuity. And that's what SNCC did by deferring to indigenous leadership. There was not the imposition of an agenda, right? There was a meeting of minds. There was a meeting of agendas, and there was intense, this is the real point, incredible amounts of thinking, collaborative thinking about this problem of outsiders, people coming in, and an indigenous, like that's complicated. Black Lives Matter, we had a lot of people floating to different, what in SNCC they called them hot spots. When a conflict, an antagonism is really brewing And so Black Lives Matter, people were traveling Ferguson, but not in the same way, right? So thinking about how you even responsibly enter a place, SNCC did a lot of this work. And we need different examples. City is different than rural, obvious. We have different fields of play. And so there's so much to be done. So this was a wonderful class. I want to thank the chat. I want to thank Mr. King again. I want to thank you guys. You guys, this was awesome. I'm sorry I didn't get through the full. Let me just see what this was important. Because after Herbert Lee, look how they re-strategize, bro. They even planned the calendar around farming, the political calendar they developed around the agricultural season. Do you see? That's that thinking. But so they say everyone is familiar with the history of the movement in this county and the mystique which surrounds it. This makes organization both harder and easier. Harder because the people remember Herbert Lee and Lewis Allen. Allen witnessed the murder and was executed years later, a day before he was going to move out of Mississippi, because he was a witness and he asked the FBI to protect him, and they didn't. Easier because, so again, another federal, I call it predatory federalism, but that doesn't really capture it, but there's something there. Easier, well, no, because it's about how government is arranged. It's about the state and the federal relation. I mean, this is very important about the U.S.'s specific structure. Right. And so, that's the basis of the Civil War is federalism, or how do you, whatever. Yeah. So that's where my thinking comes out around this master versus state, because I'm trying to identify two different agents. But anyways, it's easier because there are contacts and some familiarity with the movement. Our strategy is to build an organization of the farmers around some issue other than voting, because they know voting is too lethal. So they're remaking the strategy in the image of the execution. Around some issue other than voting, federal programs, really economic organization. Then after we have some base, a sense of community and a sense of strength, we will turn to voting. To speak of going to the courthouse in Liberty now would attract about 10 to 20 people, many of whom would suffer severe reprisals. It would recall 61 and we would be paralyzed. This is the thinking. This is strategy. They're understanding the conditions. Yeah? I'm talking to you because you're the one that said conditions. Okay, I think we're 5 minutes over. Tomorrow, Atlantic City, and more of a wrapping up feeling. So I can't wait to see you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. That was so fantastic.